Sarah reconnects with an old colleague in the elevator of the building where she works. Ryan, once brilliant, now carries the weight of something unspoken in his eyes. The chance encounter hides a powerful secret and a proposal that could change everything. But is Sarah ready to discover the truth? Sarah observed her reflection in the elevator mirror as she rode up to another day of work on the 20th floor of the office building in downtown New York City. At 28 years old, she wore a well-tailored navy blazer over a white blouse, completing the image of the successful executive she had built over the last 5 years. Her brown hair was tied back in an elegant bun, and nude lipstick completed the professional look she prized so much. The elevator stopped on the 10th floor, and a man hurried in, nearly dropping his briefcase. Sarah discreetly observed him in the reflection. Slightly wrinkled grey suit, slightly crooked tie, and an air of worry etched on his face. He seemed familiar, but she couldn't remember from where. 15th floor? He asked, noticing the button was already pressed. Yes, Sarah replied, and then recognized that voice. Ryan? The man turned, surprised, and his eyes widened in recognition. Sarah. Wow, it's been so long. Ryan had been her classmate in business school, always sitting in the front row asking brilliant questions to the professors. He was known for his exceptional talent with numbers and business strategy, but the man in front of her seemed like a worn-out version of that promising student. Do you work here? She asked, genuinely interested. I started 2 weeks ago at Vertex Consulting, he replied, nervously adjusting his tie. And you? I've been at Genesis Investments for 5 years, Sarah said, realizing how ironic fate could be. In college, everyone had bet that Ryan would be the first to secure a prominent position in the financial market. The elevator arrived at the 15th floor, and Ryan said goodbye with a shy smile. Sarah continued her ascent, but something about that encounter disturbed her. The spark that once emanated from her colleague's eyes had been replaced by a shadow of concern. Arriving at her desk, Sarah tried to focus on the report she needed to analyze, but her thoughts kept returning to Ryan. What could have happened to make him so different? In college, he was the model student, president of the student council, tutor for various subjects. Everyone said he had a bright future ahead of him. During lunch, Sarah decided to do a quick search for Ryan on social media. His professional profile was outdated, showing only experiences in smaller companies, far below the potential everyone saw in him. The last update on his social networks was from 3 years ago. In the afternoon, during a meeting with investors, Sarah found herself looking out the window of the 20th floor, observing the city that stretched as far as the eye could see. New York City had always had that power to transform destinies, to elevate some to the top, while others... Sarah? Her boss, Barbara's voice, brought her back to reality. Can you show us the projections for the next quarter? Sarah quickly resumed her professional posture, presenting the numbers with the competence that had brought her to that position. But an idea was beginning to form in her mind. After the meeting, she decided to do something impulsive, something that wasn't characteristic of her methodical personality. She went down to the 15th floor and asked at the Vertex reception for Ryan. He left for an external meeting, the receptionist informed. Do you want to leave a message? Sarah hesitated for a moment, then took a business card from her pocket. Please give this to him. On the back of the card, she wrote, Coffee tomorrow, 10 a.m. City Cafe, here on the ground floor. We need to talk about an opportunity. Returning to her desk, Sarah began to structure a plan in her mind. For months, she had been developing a side project, something that could revolutionize the way small businesses access investments. It was a system that would democratize access to capital, allowing promising entrepreneurs, but without connections, to have a real chance to grow. The project was practically ready, but it lacked someone with expertise in risk analysis and financial modeling. Someone like Ryan always was in college. At night in her apartment in Manhattan, Sarah opened her laptop and began reviewing her notes on the project. The white walls of her home office were covered with colorful post-its, each containing an idea or a point to be developed. It had been her method of organization since college, and Ryan used to joke that her room looked like a modern art gallery. As she organized the documents she wanted to show him the next day, Sarah wondered if she was doing the right thing. After all, she didn't know what had happened to Ryan in recent years, what had led him to that consultancy when everyone expected to see him running an investment bank. Her cell phone vibrated with a message from the Vertex receptionist. Mr. Ryan asked to confirm tomorrow's coffee. Sarah smiled, feeling that familiar excitement that always preceded big changes in her life. Something told her that this casual encounter in the elevator wasn't mere coincidence. In a city of over 8 million inhabitants, running into Ryan again, at that specific moment in her life, seemed like the work of destiny. She prepared for bed with her mind buzzing with ideas. Her project needed someone with the kind of brilliance that Ryan demonstrated in college. And maybe, just maybe, he needed an opportunity to rekindle that flame that seemed to have gone out in his eyes. What Sarah didn't know was that this coffee would change not only her professional life, but would trigger a series of events that would completely transform her view on success, friendship, and second chances. Fate had put Ryan in her path again, for a reason, and she was about to discover what it was. The next morning, Sarah woke up before the alarm, something rare for her, who always took advantage of every minute of sleep. She chose a more casual outfit for work, black dress pants and an emerald green silk blouse that highlighted her eyes. She wanted to create a more relaxed environment for the conversation with Ryan. She arrived at the office earlier than usual and took the opportunity to review her presentation one more time. It wasn't just a business project she wanted to share with Ryan. It was a dream of transforming the financial market into something fairer and more accessible. At 9:55, she went down to City Cafe, choosing a discreet table near the window. The Cafe had a sophisticated but welcoming air, with walls lined with dark wood and paintings of old coffee plantations decorating the environment. The aroma of freshly roasted beans filled the air, creating the perfect atmosphere for an important conversation. While waiting, Sarah observed the movement on the street through the shop window. Hurried executives with to-go coffee cups, salespeople arranging store windows, and messengers on their motorcycles weaving between cars. New York City in its usual frantic routine. At exactly 10 a.m., Ryan entered the cafe. He was wearing the same grey suit from the day before, but had made a visible effort to look more presentable. His tie was perfectly aligned and his hair well combed. Still, his deep dark circles betrayed sleepless nights. Punctual as always, Sarah smiled, indicating the chair in front of her. Ryan sat down, visibly nervous. "I confess I was surprised by your invitation and intrigued by this talk of opportunity." A waitress approached, and they placed their orders. A cappuccino for Sarah and a black coffee for Ryan. The silence that followed was loaded with expectation. "Ryan," Sarah began, carefully choosing her words, "do you remember our final graduation project? The one about democratizing access to credit?" He nodded, a momentary spark crossing his tired eyes. "How could I forget? It was the only summa cum laude in the class." "I never abandoned that idea," she continued, opening her folder and removing some documents. "In fact, I've spent the last few years developing it, adapting it to new technologies and market realities." Ryan leaned forward, interested, as Sarah began to explain her project. The waitress brought their coffees, but they barely touched the drinks, absorbed in the unfolding conversation. Sarah carefully observed Ryan's expression as he analyzed the documents spread out on the cafe table. His eyes quickly scanned the pages, and she could see that familiar spark gradually returning, the same one he used to have during classes when he discovered the solution to a particularly complex problem. "This is impressive," he murmured, finally looking up. "You've managed to solve the problem of automated credit analysis for small businesses, and this risk assessment algorithm." He paused, flipping through one of the documents again. "It's brilliant." Sarah felt her heart race at the compliment. It was exactly this capacity for quick and deep understanding that she remembered about Ryan. The algorithm works, but it needs to be refined. And there's the whole issue of practical implementation, the interface with banks. "And that's where you need me," Ryan completed, a sad smile playing on his lips. "Sarah, things have changed a lot since college." She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on his. "What happened, Ryan? Everyone expected you. That I'd become a big executive, CEO of some bank before 30. He laughed humorlessly, taking a sip of his now cold coffee. "Sometimes life has other plans." Sarah remained silent, giving him space to continue. The cafe was almost empty now. The morning rush had passed. "Remember my sister, Paige?" he asked, his voice dropping a tone. Sarah nodded. Paige was 3 years younger than them, and sometimes appeared at college to have lunch with her brother. She was a cheerful girl, full of life. She had a serious health problem. Right after we graduated. Ryan paused, taking a deep breath. The treatments were expensive, very expensive. My parents had already sold practically everything they had. I had just landed a promising job at an investment bank, but you gave up everything to help, Sarah completed softly. I took a job at a small finance company, which paid less but gave me more schedule flexibility. Then when things started to get better with Paige, I tried to return to the main market, but he gestured vaguely. 3 years is a long time. In our field. Doors started to close. Sarah felt her heart tighten. How many times had she wondered why she had never heard from him again? How many times had she imagined that he would be shining in some big international bank? "And how is Paige now?" she asked gently. A genuine smile illuminated Ryan's face for the first time. "She's great. Graduated in psychology last year, already working. That's why I accepted this job at Vertex. Now that she's okay, I can try to rebuild my career." Sarah looked again at the documents on the table, an idea forming in her mind. "Ryan, what if this was your chance to start over? Not as an employee of a consultancy, but as a partner in something bigger." He looked at her suspiciously. "Sarah, I don't have capital to invest." "I don't need capital," she interrupted him. "I need your knowledge, your experience, and yes, also your experience from these last few years. You know what it's like to fight against the system. You know how hard it is for ordinary people to have access to fair credit." Ryan picked up one of the documents again, studying it more closely. "Do you already have any interested investors?" "I have 3 funds willing to enter the project," Sarah responded, feeling the excitement grow in her voice. "But before closing with any of them, I want to have the right team, and you, Ryan, have always been the most brilliant person I've known when it comes to financial analysis." "People change, Sarah," he said, but she could see that he was considering the proposal. "Yes, they change," she agreed, "sometimes for the better. The Ryan I knew in college was brilliant, but maybe a little disconnected from the reality of ordinary people. The Ryan sitting in front of me now understands what it's like to struggle, what it's like to need a chance." He remained silent for a long moment, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. The cafe was completely empty now except for them and a waiter discreetly organizing some distant tables. "How long do I have to think?" he finally asked. Sarah smiled. "The project is practically ready to be presented to investors. I need an answer by Monday." 3 days, he murmured, starting to gather the documents. "Take them with you," Sarah said. "Study, analyze, I have copies of everything. And Ryan," she waited until he looked her in the eyes, "I really believe we can make a difference with this." He nodded, carefully storing the papers in his briefcase. When he stood up, he seemed taller, as if a weight had been temporarily removed from his shoulders. "Monday," he confirmed. Sarah watched as he left the cafe, his figure blending into the crowd passing on the sidewalk. Her cell phone vibrated. 3 missed calls from Barbara, her boss. She had completely lost track of time. But as she went up to her office, she couldn't regret it. Something told her that conversation was the beginning of something important, something that could change not only their lives, but the lives of many other people. What she didn't know was that at that exact moment, other people were also interested in her project. In his office on the 40th floor of one of the most luxurious buildings on Wall Street, Richard Montgomery, CEO of the country's largest investment bank, held a report on his desk. "So the girl finally decided to make a move," he muttered. To himself, his eyes fixed on Sarah's photo attached to the document. "Interesting. The morning sun illuminated New York City through the glass windows of his office, casting elongated shadows over the city. Richard smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He had big plans for Sarah's project, plans she couldn't even imagine. Back at her desk, Sarah began responding to the emails accumulated during her absence, but her mind kept returning to the conversation with Ryan. There was something about his story that intrigued her, details that didn't quite fit. Why had he never sought help? Why did no one in the class know what had happened? She opened her laptop and started researching Ryan again, this time more deeply. There was something in his expression when he talked about the investment bank, something that suggested there was more to the story than he was telling. What Sarah would discover in the next few hours would completely change her perspective on her old college classmate and put her on a path of no return. But for now she just typed, her fingers flying over the keyboard, while the sun rose in the New York sky, promising another hot spring day. The screen of Sarah's laptop glowed in the dimness of her office. It was past 7 in the evening, and most of her colleagues had gone home. Her research on Ryan had led to an intriguing discovery. Before disappearing from the financial market, he had worked for exactly 3 months at Montgomery Bank Investment. How did I not notice this before? She muttered to herself, opening another page of results. Ryan's name appeared in an old report about a bank shareholders meeting, partially visible in a group photo. He was standing next to Richard Montgomery, both smiling at the camera. Her cell phone vibrated on the desk. It was a message from Barbara. Meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. Project presentation to the board. Sarah felt a chill in her stomach. She hadn't mentioned to her boss her plans to develop the project independently. Barbara had always been her mentor, having brought her to Genesis Investments right after college. How would she react to knowing that her protégé was planning to leave? Hey, movement in the hallway caught her attention. Through the glass walls of her office, she saw a familiar figure talking to the night security guard. Claire Montgomery, Richard's daughter and new director of innovation at Montgomery Bank. Sarah quickly minimized the windows of her browser. Claire walked towards her, her heels echoing on the marble floor of the empty office. "Sarah, what a surprise to find you here so late," Claire smiled, leaning against the doorframe. They had studied together in college, although they had never been close. "I was just thinking about you." "Claire, what brings you to Genesis?" "Business," she answered vaguely, entering the office and sitting in the chair in front of Sarah's desk. "Actually, I came to make an interesting proposal." Sarah felt her heart race. Could it be possible that Richard Montgomery already knew about her project? "Dad is very interested in the work you've been developing here," Claire continued, taking an envelope from her bag. "He would like to invite you to dinner tomorrow night to discuss any opportunities." Sarah took the envelope, feeling the heavy paper between her fingers. "How does your father know about my work?" Claire laughed softly. "Sarah, do you really think something happens in the New York financial market without my father knowing? Especially when it involves someone with your talent?" Before Sarah could respond, her cell phone vibrated again. It was a message from Ryan. "We need to talk. It's urgent. Can you meet me now?" "I'm sorry, Claire, but I have an unavoidable commitment," Sarah said, standing up and starting to pack her things. "Of course," Claire smiled, also standing up. "But don't forget about dinner tomorrow. Dad doesn't usually make this kind of invitation twice." As soon as Claire left, Sarah replied to Ryan's message, arranging to meet him at a cafe near the Wall Street subway station. 15 minutes later, she found him sitting in an isolated corner of the establishment, nervously fidgeting with an untouched cup of coffee. "I saw that you've been researching me," he said as soon as she sat down. Sarah froze. "How did you—" "I received an alert. I still have some friends in the market who keep me informed," he sighed deeply. "You found something about my passage through Montgomery Bank, didn't you?" 3 months, Marina said. "What happened, Raphael? Why didn't you mention this earlier today?" He looked around as if checking if anyone could hear them. "Because that's where everything started to crumble, and because—" he hesitated. "Because what I discovered there has everything to do with your project." Marina leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "Your project aims to democratize access to credit, create a fairer system for small businesses, right? He waited for her to nod before continuing. Well, in my 3 months at Montgomery Bank, I discovered that they have a similar project, but with very different objectives. What kind of objectives? They want to use technology not to democratize, but to create an even more exclusive system, a system that seems fair on the surface, but is actually programmed to benefit only the big players in the market. Marina felt a shiver run down her spine. How did you find this out? I was part of the development team, Raphael explained, his voice lowering even more. At first it seemed like a revolutionary project, but then I started to notice strange patterns in the algorithms, specific requirements that didn't make sense from a technical standpoint. When I questioned it, I was transferred to another department. A week later, they found irregularities in my conduct and I was fired. And your sister? The story about her illness. It's true, he interrupted, but that's not why I left the market. After I was fired from Montgomery Bank, no one else would hire me. It's amazing how one phone call from Richard Montgomery can close all doors. Marina took out the envelope that Clara had given her from her purse. They invited me to dinner tonight. Raphael paled. They know about your project. How? I didn't show it to anyone but you and a few trusted investors. Emily. Raphael leaned across the table, his eyes intense. Do you really think you managed to develop this whole project without them noticing? Montgomery Bank has eyes everywhere, and if they're interested, then it's not an invitation, it's a warning, Emily completed, feeling her stomach sink. Exactly, Raphael confirmed. They're going to try to do to you what they did to me. First try to co-opt, then destroy. The cafe was almost empty now, just a few scattered customers finishing their orders. Through the window, Emily could see the city lights twinning in the night, thousands of small businesses struggling to survive, people trying to realize their dreams against a system that seemed programmed to make them fail. What do you suggest? She finally asked. Raphael took out his phone and showed her a series of documents. For the last 3 years, I haven't been idle. I have proof of what they were developing, evidence of the manipulations in the system. I didn't use it before because I had no way to fight them alone. But now, with your project, your knowledge of the market, we can expose everything, Emily completed, an idea starting to form in her mind. Yes, but we need to act fast, Raphael warned. From the moment you meet Richard Montgomery tonight, the clock starts ticking. Emily looked again at the envelope in her hands, thinking about the meeting with the Genesis board in the morning, the dinner with Montgomery at night, all the pieces of the puzzle that were starting to fit together. Then, she said, a determined smile forming on her lips, we'll have to be faster than them. What Emily didn't know was that, at that exact moment, other gears were already in motion. In his office on the top floor of Montgomery Bank, Richard Montgomery was watching the security camera footage from the cafe, transmitted in real time to his tablet. So young Raphael finally decided to show his cards, he muttered, making a note in his black-covered notebook. Interesting. Very interesting. Emily arrived at Genesis Investments at 7:30 the next morning, carrying a folder with her presentation for the board. She had slept only 3 hours, spending most of the night reviewing the documents Raphael had shown her and preparing her strategy for the next few days. The office was still practically empty, except for a few cleaning staff and 1 or 2 more dedicated employees. Emily took advantage of the silence to organize her thoughts, mentally reviewing each step she would need to take. "You're here early," Beatrice's voice surprised her. Her boss was standing at the door, holding a steaming cup of coffee. Unlike usual, there was something tense in her posture. "I wanted to review a few points before the meeting," Emily responded, trying to keep her voice casual. Beatrice entered the room and closed the door behind her. "Emily, before the meeting, we need to talk." She paused, taking a sip of coffee. "Richard Montgomery called me last night." Emily felt her heart race, but kept her expression neutral. "Oh?" "He mentioned an interesting project you've been developing, a project that curiously was never presented to the Genesis board." Beatrice's tone wasn't accusatory, but Emily could feel the disappointment in her words. For 5 years, Beatrice had been more than a boss. She had been her mentor, her guide in the complex world of finance. "I was going to tell you," Emily began, carefully choosing her words, "but I wanted to be sure it was viable before..." Accepting Montgomery Bank's offer? Beatrice completed, arching an eyebrow. Emily's eyes widened. I didn't accept any offer. Not yet, Beatrice sighed, sitting in the chair in front of Emily's desk. Look, I'm not here to judge your career, choices. You're brilliant, Emily, and you deserve all the opportunities that come your way. She hesitated. Just be careful with Richard Montgomery. There was something in Beatrice's tone that made Emily lean forward. You know him well? Well, enough to know that he never does anything without an ulterior motive, Beatrice answered, standing up. The meeting starts in 15 minutes. I'll see you in the boardroom. As soon as Beatrice left, Emily took out her phone and quickly typed, a message to Raphael. We need to accelerate the plan. Montgomery is already moving the pieces. The response came almost instantly. Found more documents, meet me at lunch. Emily put away her phone and organized her presentations. She had to survive the board meeting first, then think about how to deal with Montgomery. The Genesis boardroom was packed when she entered. Besides the usual members, there were several faces she didn't recognize. Important investors, according to the whispers she heard. Beatrice was seated to the right of the board chairman, her face a mask of professionalism. Ms. Taylor, the board chairman greeted her. We're eager to see your projections for the next quarter. Emily connected her laptop to the projector and began her presentation. For 45 minutes, she presented numbers, graphs, and analyses, answering questions with the competence that had made her one of the youngest managers in the company. But her mind was partially elsewhere, thinking about Raphael's documents, Montgomery's invitation, Beatrice's words of warning. Excellent presentation, as always, the chairman commented when she finished. But there's another matter we'd like to discuss. Emily felt the air in the room get heavier. It has come to our attention that you've been developing a rather interesting parallel project, he continued. The board would like to know why we weren't informed about this. All eyes turned to her. Emily could feel the weight of expectations. Suspicions, others' ambitions. It was like being on a chessboard where every move needed to be calculated with precision. The project is still in the development phase, she responded, keeping her voice firm. My intention was to present it to Genesis once it was more structured. And the dinner with Richard Montgomery tonight? One of the board members asked. Is that also part of the development phase? Emily noticed Beatrice shifting uncomfortably in her chair. How had that information reached the board so quickly? I received an invitation, yes, she admitted. But I haven't decided if I'm going to accept it yet. The board chairman exchanged glances with other members before turning back to her. Emily, you're one of our most promising talents. Genesis has invested a lot in your professional development. We hope you remember that when making your decisions. The message was clear. Choose your side carefully. The meeting ended shortly after, and Emily returned to her office feeling the weight of the last few hours. Her phone vibrated with another message from Raphael. Change of plans, we can't meet in person, I'm being followed. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. She quickly typed, What do you mean? 2 men in a black car since I left home. Montgomery. Is watching us. Before she could respond, another message arrived, this time from an unknown number. Ms. Taylor, Mr. Montgomery's limousine will pick you up at 7 p.m. at your apartment. Business attire. Emily looked out her office window, observing the city stretching to the horizon. Somewhere out there, Raphael was being followed. Montgomery was weaving his web, and she was about to enter a game much bigger than she had imagined. Her computer beeped with the arrival of an email. It was from Beatrice with just one line. When all this is over, you'll understand why I'm worried. Emily opened her drawer and took out a small black flash drive, her backup copy of the entire project, and the evidence Raphael had shared. She carefully tucked it into a secret compartment in her purse. If she was entering a war, she would need all the weapons possible. What she didn't know was that, at that exact moment, a secret meeting was happening on the top floor of Montgomery Bank. Richard Montgomery was seated at the head of a long table, surrounded by high-ranking executives. The girl is smart, he said, projecting a photo of Emily onto the room's screen, but she still has a lot to learn about how the world really works. Clara Montgomery, seated to her father's right, smiled. And we're going to teach her tonight? Richard picked up a red folder on the table. Tonight, my daughter, we're going to offer her a choice, and her answer will determine much more than just her future. At 6:45 p.m., Emily took one last look. In the mirror. She had chosen a classic black dress, elegant without being ostentatious, complemented by a delicate pearl necklace she had inherited from her grandmother. Her hair was tied in an elaborate bun, and her makeup, flawless, disguised the dark circles from sleepless nights. Her phone vibrated with a message from Raphael. Be careful. Montgomery is an expert at making offers impossible to refuse. She put the phone in her purse, along with the flash drive containing all the evidence. Not that she planned to use it tonight, but she had learned it was better to be prepared for any eventuality. Punctually at 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. Montgomery's driver was a tall, silent man who led her to a black limousine parked in front of her building. Emily noticed a second car, also black, parked discreetly on the corner. Raphael's words about being followed echoed in her mind. The Haus limousine wound through San Francisco traffic until it reached the top of the Mark, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. On the 19th floor, the night view of the city was breathtaking. Richard Montgomery was already waiting for her, standing by the window, contemplating the city lights. Emily, he smiled, turning to greet her. Or should I say the young woman who's revolutionizing the financial market? She accepted the firm handshake, noticing the details. The impeccably cut suit, the watch that probably cost more than her apartment, the smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Montgomery, it's an honor. Please, Richard, he gestured for her to sit down. After all, we might soon be partners. A sommelier approached with a bottle of red wine. Montgomery tasted and approved before they served the glasses. Beaujolais 1982, he commented. An exceptional year. Just like you, Emily. Beatrice always told me you were special, but I confess I underestimated your potential. Emily took a small sip of wine, giving herself time to choose her words. Beatrice has been an excellent mentor. Yes, she has a talent for identifying rough diamonds, Montgomery agreed, just as she has a talent for being overly protective of her protégés. Before Emily could respond, Clara Montgomery joined them, gracefully sliding into a chair. Sorry I'm late. The traffic is impossible. Clara insisted on joining the dinner when she heard you were coming, Montgomery explained, though Emily suspected nothing about this evening was by chance. The first course was served, an appetizer of scallops with champagne foam. Emily noticed other restaurant patrons casting curious glances in their direction. It wasn't every day you saw someone dining with Richard Montgomery. So Emily, Clara began, her tone too casual to be natural, tell us more about your project. Dad was fascinated when he discovered the details. Emily kept her expression neutral, though her heart had sped up. I imagine you already have all the information you need, Mr. Monty. Richard. He laughed, a rich and controlled sound. Straight to the point. Excellent. Yes, I know about your credit democratization system. I know about the risk analysis algorithms, about the interface with small business owners. Brilliant work. And potentially dangerous, Clara added, her voice lowering a tone. Montgomery made a gesture and the waiters moved away, leaving them in relative privacy. Emily, I'll be frank with you. Your project could change the financial market in a way that, well, that not everyone is prepared to accept. Change usually bothers those who are comfortable with the status quo, Emily responded, holding his gaze. True, he agreed, surprising her, and that's why I'm willing to make an offer. Montgomery Bank wants to buy your project in full. Emily felt her stomach sink. It's not for sale. Everything is for sale, my dear, he smiled, taking an envelope from his jacket. Here's our initial offer. Please take a look. Emily opened the envelope and almost choked on the number of zeros in the document. It was more money than she could earn in several lifetimes. And this is just the beginning, Clara added. We're also offering a position as director in our innovation division. We would work together. It seems too generous, Emily commented, carefully folding the document. It's not generosity, Montgomery responded. It's investment. Your project, combined with our infrastructure and resources, could revolutionize the market. Under the right direction, of course. Under your control, you mean? Montgomery's smile faltered for a moment. Emily, you're young, brilliant. You have a promising future ahead of you. Don't make the same mistake Raphael did. The name hung in the air like a veiled threat. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine but kept her voice firm. And what mistake would that be? Thinking you can change the system by fighting against it, he answered, his tone now harder. Raphael had potential, just like you. But he chose the wrong path. And now he works at a small consultancy, Clara completed, while he could be sitting here with us. Emily looked out the window at the city stretching endlessly. How many dreams, how many small businesses, how many people struggling to survive were down there? Her project could help them, or it could become just another tool in the hands of the powerful. How long do I have to think about it? She asked, turning back to Montgomery. Until tomorrow night, he answered. And Emily, he paused significantly, consider your answer carefully. Some opportunities only come once in a lifetime. The rest of the dinner passed in a haze of superficial conversations and elaborate dishes. When the limousine dropped her off at her building, it was already past 11 p.m. Emily went straight up to her apartment, her mind buzzing with the implications of the evening. As soon as she entered, she noticed something was wrong. The door to her home office was ajar when she was sure she had left it closed. Heart racing, she turned on the lights. The room was exactly as she had left it, except for one detail. On her desk was an envelope identical to the one Montgomery had given her at the restaurant. But this one contained only a photo, an old one from college days. In it, Beatrice smiled next to Richard Montgomery, both much younger, holding what looked like a contract. On the back of the photo, a single handwritten sentence, "Ask your mentor about 2008. Emily couldn't sleep that night. The photo found in her office deeply disturbed her. How had someone entered her apartment? And more importantly, what was the true story between Beatrice and Montgomery? At 5 in the morning, after hours of tossing and turning in bed, she got up and started researching. 2008, the year mentioned on the back of the photo, had been marked by the global financial crisis. Montgomery Bank not only survived the crisis, but came out stronger, absorbing several smaller banks that went bankrupt. Her phone vibrated with a message from Raphael. "We need to talk. I have information about 2008. Emily responded immediately. "Breakfast, 6:30, St. Benedict's Bakery. Too public. Meet me on the rooftop of the building where I work. 7th floor." She got ready quickly, opting for a more casual outfit, jeans and a blazer, since it was Saturday. As she drove through the still dark streets of San Francisco, her mind wouldn't stop making connections. Beatrice had started at Genesis right after the crisis in 2008. The Vertex Consulting building was practically empty at that hour. Sarah went straight to the rooftop, finding Ryan already waiting for her. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "How did you find out about 2008? She asked without preamble. "I wasn't the first one Montgomery tried to silence," Ryan answered, pulling a tablet from his pocket. "Look at this." It was an old report from a financial newspaper. "Promising executive disappears after reporting irregularities in bank." "Elizabeth?" Sarah whispered, recognizing a younger photo of her mentor. "She was the compliance director at Montgomery Bank," Ryan explained. In 2008, she discovered that the bank was involved in irregular operations, using insider information to profit from the approaching crisis. "Oh, Maritina," Sarah sat down on one of the rooftop benches, feeling the weight of the revelations. But she never reported anything. On the contrary, she started working at Genesis Investments right after. "Exactly," Ryan agreed. "Montgomery must have made her the same offer he made to me that he's making to you now. The difference is that she accepted." "No," Sarah shook her head. "Elizabeth wouldn't do that. She always fought for transparency, for ethics." "People change, Sarah, especially when they're pressured enough." Before she could respond, her cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Elizabeth. "We need to talk. Now. It's about last night." Sarah showed the message to Ryan. "How does she know?" Montgomery must have told her, he shrugged. They obviously still keep in touch. I'm going to meet her, Sarah decided, standing up. I need to hear her side of the story. Be careful, Ryan warned. And Sarah, don't trust anyone completely. She nodded and headed to the location Elizabeth had indicated, a small cafe in Beacon Hill, away from the usual financial circuits. Her mentor was already there when she arrived, looking as elegant as always, but with an evident tension in her shoulders. I imagine you have many questions, Elizabeth began as soon as Sarah sat down. 2008, Sarah said simply. Elizabeth closed her eyes for a moment. Who told you? Does it matter? Is it true that you worked for Montgomery? Yes, Elizabeth sighed. And yes, I discovered irregularities. Many of them. I had all the evidence, all the documents, and then Montgomery called me for a conversation, very similar to the one you had last night, Elizabeth continued, her voice lowering. He showed me photos of my family, details of my parents' routine, my younger brother's school. The message was clear. Sarah felt a chill. He threatened your family. Not directly. Montgomery never makes direct threats. He just shows what he's capable of. Elizabeth took a sip of her coffee. Then he made an offer, a position at Genesis, which at the time was a smaller subsidiary of Montgomery Bank, and the guarantee that my family would be safe. Genesis belongs to Montgomery Bank, Sarah asked, surprised. Not officially. On paper, we're completely independent, but... Elizabeth hesitated. But he controls everything behind the scenes, Sarah completed. Sarah, you're like a daughter. To me, Elizabeth said, leaning forward. That's why I need you to understand Montgomery isn't really interested in your project. He wants you. What do you mean? He saw in you the same thing he saw in me 15 years ago. Someone brilliant, idealistic, with the potential to change the system. And people like that are dangerous, unless they're on his side. Sarah slowly processed the information. Is that why you brought me to Genesis? To keep me under control? At first, yes, Elizabeth admitted. It was part of the deal. But then I started to get to know you, to see your potential, your integrity. I spent years trying to protect you, prepare you for this moment. What moment? The moment when you would have to make the same choice I made. Elizabeth pulled an envelope from her purse. Here is all the evidence I collected in 2008, along with more recent documents. Things I kept gathering over the years, waiting for the right moment. Sarah took the envelope with trembling hands. Why are you giving me this now? Because you're stronger than I was, Elizabeth smiled sadly. And because now you have something. I didn't have allies. Ryan, Sarah murmured. Among others, Elizabeth nodded. There are more people discontented with Montgomery than he imagines. People in strategic positions, waiting for an opportunity. Sarah's cell phone vibrated. Another message from Chloe Montgomery. Dad expects your answer by 8 p.m. today. Elizabeth saw the message and her face turned serious. Sarah, whatever your decision, know that this time you're not alone. Sarah looked at the envelope in her hands, thinking of all the people Montgomery had manipulated over the years. Ryan, Elizabeth, how many more? Her project, which was supposed to help small business owners, could become just another control tool in his hands. We need a plan, she said finally. We already have one, Elizabeth smiled, a glint of determination in her eyes. Actually, I've been preparing this for 15 years. The clock showed 2 p.m. when Sarah entered a discreet meeting room in the basement of a hotel in Back Bay. Elizabeth had organized the meeting with extreme care, ensuring that no one could trace them. Ryan was already there, along with 3 people Sarah didn't know. Sarah, these are our allies, Elizabeth made the introductions. Charles Mendez, former technology director of Montgomery Bank, Sophie Torres, current senior data analyst at Genesis, and Edward Campbell, a lawyer specializing in banking law. Sarah greeted each of them, noticing how tense but determined they looked. Charles had gray hair and an air of someone who carried many stories. Sophie couldn't be more than 30, but her eyes showed maturity beyond her years. Edward exuded a calm and professional confidence. Everyone in this room has their own reasons for wanting to see Montgomery fall, Elizabeth continued. "And each one has a crucial role in what we're going to do." Charles opened his laptop and projected a series of documents on the wall. "For the last 5 years, I've been mapping out the entire technological infrastructure of Montgomery Bank. I know every server, every security system, every backup. And I have access to all of Genesis's transaction records," Sophie added, "including those that Montgomery tries to keep hidden." "What exactly are we looking for?" Sarah asked. "Montgomery's Achilles heel," Edward answered. "Something so big that not even he can cover up." Elizabeth typed a password on her tablet and showed a series of complex graphs. Montgomery didn't just survive the 2008 crisis, he created it, at least in part. He used insider information to manipulate the market, causing the bankruptcy of several smaller banks that he later bought for a fraction of their value. "How did he manage to hide this for so long?" Sarah asked, impressed by the complexity of the scheme. "Because he's brilliant," Ryan answered. "Each irregular operation is carefully masked by dozens of legitimate transactions. It's like looking for a needle in a digital haystack. But now we have something we didn't have before." Sophie smiled, turning her laptop to show a screen full of code. "Your algorithm, Sarah. With some modifications, it can not only identify credit patterns, but also detect anomalies in financial transactions." Sarah felt her heart race. Her project, which was supposed to democratize access to credit, could be the key to exposing one of the largest financial schemes in the country. "The plan is simple," Elizabeth explained. "When Montgomery calls you tonight for your answer, you're going to accept the offer." "What?" Sarah and Ryan exclaimed simultaneously. "Montgomery expects you to resist," Edward explained. "He has a mental script of how this is going to happen. He's going to pressure you, make veiled threats, maybe even use your family as he did with Elizabeth. But if you accept immediately, he'll lower his guard," Sarah completed, starting to understand. "Exactly," Charles agreed. "And that's where your algorithm comes in. While he's busy integrating you into the bank, thinking he's co-opted you, we'll be using my own system to expose his irregular operations," Sarah concluded. "But we can't." "Just report it," Edward warned. "Montgomery has judges and regulators in his pocket. We need to create a scandal so big that not even he can control it." Sophie projected a timeline on the wall. "We have to synchronize everything perfectly. Charles will create a breach in the bank's systems. I'll run the modified algorithm. And Edward will ensure that the evidence reaches several investigative bodies and the press simultaneously." "How long do we have?" Sarah asked. 3 days, Elizabeth answered. "That's how long Montgomery usually takes to integrate new directors. After that, he'll start to realize something is wrong." Ryan, who had been silent for some time, finally spoke. "It's risky. If something goes wrong..." "Everyone here knows the risks," Charles interrupted him softly. "But we also know that this might be our only chance." Sarah looked at each face in the room, seeing in them the same mix of fear and determination she felt. These were people who had been hurt by Montgomery, who had seen their dreams and principles crushed by his power. Now they had a chance to make a difference. "How are we going to ensure he doesn't find out?" she asked. Sophie smiled again, this time with a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Remember how your algorithm works with microtransactions. We're going to use that. Thousands of small operations, all seemingly legitimate, but together they form a pattern. When Montgomery realizes, it'll be too late." "And Chloe?" Sarah asked, remembering Montgomery's daughter. "She's going to work directly with me." "Chloe is complicated," Elizabeth hesitated. "She's not as loyal to her father as she seems, but for now it's better to keep her in the dark." Sarah's cell phone vibrated, a message from Chloe. "Dad is eager for your answer. Dinner at 8 p.m?" Sarah showed the message to the group. "It's starting." "Remember," Edward emphasized, "you need to seem convinced, but not too eager. Montgomery is an expert at reading people." "And after dinner?" Sarah asked. "After dinner," Elizabeth smiled, "the real work begins." They spent the next few hours refining every detail of the plan, anticipating possible problems and their solutions. When Sarah finally left the hotel, the sun was already setting, painting the Boston sky with shades of orange and pink. In her apartment, while preparing for dinner, she received one last message from Ryan. No matter what happens tonight, remember who you are and why you're doing this. Sarah looked at her reflection in the mirror, adjusting the red dress she had chosen for the occasion. This time she wasn't just a young executive intimidated by Montgomery's power. She was a woman with a plan, with allies, with a greater purpose. What she didn't know was that in his office, Richard Montgomery was also preparing for dinner. Looking at an old photo on his desk, an image of his late wife, Chloe's mother, holding a document very similar to Sarah's project. "You would be proud, Isabel," he murmured to the photo. "The circle is finally going to close." The Ritz-Carlton was even more elegant than the top of the hub. Sarah was led by a maitre through the main hall to a private room, where Richard Montgomery was waiting. This time he wasn't alone. Besides Chloe, there were two more people at the table. "Sarah," Montgomery smiled, standing up to greet her. "Allow me to introduce. This is Victor Almeida, our CFO, and this is Dr. Helen Vasconcelos, our legal director." Sarah greeted everyone, noticing how Helen observed her with particular intensity. Was there something in her look, understanding, complicity? "Please, sit down," Montgomery indicated the chair to his right. "We've already ordered the wine, an exceptional Brunello di Montalcino." Sarah sat down, feeling the weight of the gazes upon her. Chloe, on the other side of the table, seemed strangely tense. "Before we begin," Montgomery continued, "I'd like to share something with you." He took an old photo from the inside pocket of his jacket. "This is Isabel, my late wife." Sarah carefully took the photo. The woman in the image was strikingly similar to Chloe, except for the eyes. She had softer, gentler eyes. "Isabel was brilliant," Montgomery continued, his voice changing subtly. "She developed a project very similar to yours, you know. 20 years ago, she also dreamed of democratizing access to credit." Chloe shifted uncomfortably in her chair. It was evident that she didn't expect her father to touch on this subject. "What happened to the project?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious. "The market wasn't ready," Montgomery answered vaguely. "But now, with your technology, with your algorithms, we can finally realize her dream." Sarah felt a chill. There was something in the way he spoke, a mixture of nostalgia and something else, something she couldn't identify. "Mr. Montgomery." "Richard," he corrected gently. "Richard," she continued, "why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand that this isn't just a business proposal." He leaned slightly forward. "It's a chance to make history, to complete something that started a long time ago." Helen Vasconcelos cleared her throat discreetly. "Perhaps we should show Ms. Miller the documents." Montgomery nodded, and Victor opened a leather folder on the table. "We've prepared a preliminary contract," he explained. "In addition to the financial compensation discussed yesterday, we're offering a position on the board of directors and full autonomy to develop the project." Sarah examined the documents, her heart racing. The contract seemed perfect, too generous in fact. It was exactly the kind of trap Elizabeth had warned about. "Full autonomy?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. "With some safeguards, naturally," Helen explained. "The bank needs to maintain some control over the implementation." Sarah took a sip of wine, giving herself time to think. She remembered Edward's instructions. Seem interested, but not too eager. "What about the team?" she asked. "Can I bring people I trust?" "Within reason," Montgomery answered. "We'll have to do an evaluation of each nomination, of course." Chloe finally spoke up. "I was thinking about Ryan Santos. He has relevant experience and he's worked with us before." Montgomery's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Ryan is complicated, but we can discuss that later." Sarah took a deep breath, preparing for the crucial moment. "The project means a lot to me," she began. "It's not just a business, it's a dream." "Exactly what Isabel would say," Montgomery smiled. "That's why," Sarah continued, "your offer is tempting." Silence fell over the table. Helen and Victor exchanged quick glances. "Does that mean you accept?" Chloe asked, a touch of surprise in her voice. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "It means I want to be part of this. I want to see this project realized and with Montgomery Bank's resources." "Excellent," Montgomery exclaimed, although Sarah noticed a shadow of disappointment cross his face. Helen, please prepare the final documents for Monday. The rest of the dinner passed in a haze of conversations about operational details and future plans. Sarah maintained her role, showing interest and cooperation, but not excessive enthusiasm. When dessert was served, an elaborate chocolate millefeuille, Helen leaned discreetly towards her. "Impressive," she murmured, so low that only Sarah could hear. "What?" Sarah asked in the same tone. "How you kept your composure," Helen answered, an enigmatic gleam in her eyes. "I almost believed you." Before Sarah could process what that meant, Montgomery called everyone's attention. "A toast," he proposed, raising his glass, "to new beginnings and realized dreams." As the glasses clinked, Sarah noticed Chloe observing her father with a strange expression, a mixture of sadness and guilt. At the end of the night, when the limousine dropped her off at her apartment, Sarah found a message from Elizabeth. "Is it done?" "Yes," she replied. "It starts now." Going up to her apartment, Sarah couldn't help but think about Isabel Montgomery and her mysterious project. There was something about that story that didn't fit, just as there was something strange about Chloe's behavior throughout dinner. In her home office, she opened her laptop and began typing an email to Sophie. "Green light for the first phase, but there's one more thing we need to investigate." What Sarah didn't know was that, at that exact moment, in a penthouse in Beacon Hill, Chloe Montgomery was in front of an old box, pulling out piles of documents yellowed by time. At the top of the first page, an elegant handwriting had written, "Phoenix Project, Isabel Montgomery, 1998. "Forgive me, Mom," Chloe whispered, starting to read, "but I need to know the truth." Chloe Montgomery spent the entire night reading her mother's documents. At 6 in the morning, with the first light of day coming through the windows of her penthouse, she finally found what she was looking for, a diary detailing the last months of development of the Phoenix Project. "March 17th, 1998, she read in a low voice. "Richard is increasingly resistant to the changes I proposed in the algorithm. He insists that we need to maintain central control over credit approvals, but that would defeat the whole purpose of the system. How can I make him understand that true democratization means giving up control?" Her hands trembled as she turned the pages. The last entries in the diary were increasingly disturbing. "April 12th, 1998. I discovered something terrible in the bank's records. Richard isn't just resisting democratization, he's actively sabotaging small banks, preparing for a mass hostile takeover. Project Phoenix could expose all of this. I need to do something." Claire felt tears in her eyes as she read the last entry, dated 3 days before the accident that took her mother's life. "I can't allow the project to be used this way. I made copies of all the evidence. RS knows where to find them if something happens to me." RE's, the initials echoed in her mind. Ryan Sanders. But he would have been just a teenager in 1998. Her cell phone vibrated with a message from her father. "Meeting at 8 a.m. to discuss Amanda's integration." Claire looked again at the scattered documents. 15 years of lies and manipulation. Was she ready to face the truth about her father? Meanwhile, in Amanda's apartment, an emergency. Meeting was taking place via video conference. Beth, Ryan, Sophie, and Charles were discussing the next steps. "Initial access has been granted," Sophie reported, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "The system is accepting the first insertions of the algorithm." Montgomery didn't suspect. "Anything during dinner?" Beth asked. "On the contrary," Amanda replied. "He seemed almost disappointed that I accepted so easily, as if he expected more resistance." "That makes sense," Ryan commented. "He likes the game, the process of bending people to his will." "There's one more thing," Amanda hesitated. "He mentioned his late wife, Isabel. Apparently she had a project similar to mine." Ryan visibly tensed. Isabel Montgomery. That name wasn't supposed to enter this story. "Why?" everyone asked, simultaneously. "Because," Ryan took a deep breath, "Isabel Montgomery was my aunt." The silence that followed was deafening. "Your father," Beth finally spoke. "Robert Sanders." Was Isabel's younger brother, Ryan confirmed. He worked on developing Project Phoenix with her. When the accident happened, my father knew it wasn't really an accident. That's why Montgomery persecuted you so much, Amanda understood. It wasn't just about what you discovered at the bank. It was about what I could discover about the past, Ryan completed. About what really happened to my aunt. A notification. Sound interrupted the conversation. A message from Claire to Amanda. Need to see you, urgent, it's about my mother. Amanda showed the message to the group. What do we do? It's a trap, Charles warned. Not necessarily, Beth pondered. Claire has always been different from her father. What if she discovered the truth about Isabel? Ryan suggested. The original Project Phoenix documents must be somewhere. Amanda made a decision. I'm going to meet her. If there's a chance Claire is on our side, we need to take it. It's risky, Sophie warned. We're at a crucial stage of implementation. That's exactly why, Amanda insisted. If Claire knows something that can help us, don't go alone. Ryan pleaded. I'll go with you. No, Beth interrupted. I'll go. Claire knows me, trusts me to some extent, and... She hesitated. There are things about 1998 that you still don't know. Amanda agreed to the plan, setting up the meeting with Claire at a discreet cafe in Garden District. Meanwhile, Sophie would continue implementing the algorithm in the bank's systems, and Charles would monitor any suspicious activity. What no one expected was that at that very moment, Helen Vance, the legal director of Montgomery Bank, was in her office, looking at a computer screen with a grave expression. On the screen, an email from 1998, retrieved from an old backup. Dear Helen, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. The blue flash drive in the false bottom of the third drawer contains everything. Use it wisely. With love, Isabel. Helen opened the mentioned drawer, the same one she had kept locked for 15 years. Inside, exactly where Isabel had described, was a blue flash drive seemingly untouched by time. It's time, my friend, she murmured, inserting the device into her computer. Let's finish what you started. In his office on the top floor of Montgomery Bank, Richard Montgomery observed the city through the panoramic windows. On his desk, a photo of Isabel next to a young Amanda, taken at a university event years ago. The resemblance between the two was disturbing. You always said fate had a peculiar sense of humor, Isabel, he spoke to the photo. I think I finally understand what you meant. The cafe in Garden District was practically empty at that hour of the morning. Claire was already there when Amanda and Beth arrived, sitting at a table in the back away from the windows. On the table, an old box of documents. You brought Beth, Claire observed, not seeming surprised. Good. She needs to hear this too. Amanda and Beth sat down, noticing the paleness on Claire's face, the deep, dark circles that makeup couldn't completely hide. I found my mother's diary, Claire began without preamble, and the original Project Phoenix documents. But more importantly, she took an envelope from the box. I found this. It was a letter addressed to Helen Vance, dated the day of Isabel's accident. Claire didn't need to open it. She had already memorized its contents. My mother knew she was in danger, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. She discovered what my father was planning to do with small banks during the crisis she predicted was coming. Project Phoenix wasn't just about democratizing credit. It was a system that could identify and expose manipulations in the financial market. Exactly like Amanda's project, Beth murmured. It's not a coincidence, a new voice joined the conversation. Helen Vance was standing next to the table, holding a blue flash drive. Isabel planned all of this 15 years ago. What do you mean? Amanda asked, feeling her heart race. Helen sat down, placing the flash drive on the table. Isabel knew that Richard would eventually find someone to recreate her project. Someone young, brilliant, idealistic, just as she was. So she left clues, digital breadcrumbs that only the right person could follow. The base algorithms, Amanda suddenly understood. Those old academic articles that inspired me. Written by Isabel, Helen confirmed. Published in a way that seemed like just theory, but contained the seed of something revolutionary. Why are you telling us this now? Beth asked Helen. Because Isabel's plan is finally complete, Helen smiled. At this moment, Amanda's algorithm isn't just exposing Richard's current manipulations, it's revealing a pattern of 15 years of irregular operations, starting with the accident that took Isabel's life. Amanda's cell phone vibrated, a message from Sophie. It's done, the data is being sent to all regulatory agencies and major press outlets. As if in response, everyone's cell phones at the table started ringing and vibrating simultaneously. Breaking news notifications started appearing. Scandal at Montgomery Bank. Documents reveal decades of financial manipulation. Breaking news. CEO of country's largest bank involved in billion-dollar scheme. Project Phoenix. The truth behind the Montgomery empire. He'll try to cover it up, Beth warned. Not this time, Helen smiled, showing her cell phone. A live video call showed the lobby of Montgomery Bank overrun with federal agents. Claire closed her eyes, a single tear rolling down her face. Mom will finally have justice. Amanda's cell phone rang again. It was Ryan. You need to see this. Turn on the TV. Beth asked the waiter to turn on the cafe's television. Richard Montgomery was being led out of his office, while reporters jostled for a statement. Mr. Montgomery, do you have anything to say about the accusations? For a moment, the powerful banker seemed to age decades. His eyes met the cameras, and for a brief instant, Amanda could see something that seemed almost relief. Isabel, he murmured, before being led to the police car. At the cafe, Claire stood up abruptly. I need to go. He's still my father. Claire, Amanda called, your mother would be proud of you. Claire nodded, tears in her eyes, and quickly left. What now? Amanda asked, looking at Beth and Helen. Now, Beth smiled. We start rebuilding. The financial system needs a cleanup, and your project, the true Project Phoenix, will be crucial in this process. Actually, Helen added, Isabel left specific instructions about this too. She opened the flash drive on her laptop, showing a series of documents. She created a complete structure for a new financial institution based on transparency and true democratization of credit. And you two knew about this all along? Amanda asked Beth and Helen. Not exactly, Beth replied. Isabel compartmentalized the information. Each of us had only one piece of the puzzle. We needed you and Claire to complete the circle. 3 months later, the new Phoenix Financial Building gleamed under the morning sun. In the lobby, a portrait of Isabel Montgomery occupied a prominent place, next to a plaque that read, Where Innovation Meets Financial Justice. Amanda observed the movement from her new office on the 20th floor. Claire had taken over as chairman of the board, bringing a new perspective to her family's legacy. Ryan coordinated the technology area, finally using his talent to make the difference he had always dreamed of. Sophie led the data analysis team, while Charles revolutionized the technological infrastructure. Beth and Helen had become strategic consultants, ensuring that Isabel's dream stayed alive and constantly evolving. On her desk, Amanda kept 2 photos, one of Isabel Montgomery in her last days, smiling while working on her computer, and another, current one, with the entire new Phoenix team gathered. Her computer beeped with a new message. Another small business owner had been approved for a fair loan, thanks to the algorithm that now worked exactly as it should. We did it, Isabel, she murmured to the photo. Your legacy is alive. In Noi prison, Richard Montgomery received one last visit from Claire before his trial. She was always stronger than me, he admitted to his daughter. Isabel knew the system needed to change, and I was too afraid of losing control. We can still do the right thing, Dad, Claire responded softly. It's not too late to tell the whole truth. Richard looked out the barred window, seeing the same sky he once shared with Isabel. Maybe, he whispered, maybe that's exactly what she wanted all along. And somewhere in a dimension beyond our understanding, Isabel Montgomery smiled, knowing that her plan, her true legacy, had finally been completed. Dear readers, we hope that the journey of Amanda, Claire, and Isabel Montgomery's legacy has touched your hearts. This story reminds us that true change often requires courage, persistence, and above all, the willingness to fight for what is right, even when it seems impossible. If you were moved by this narrative of justice, redemption, and transformation, Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. We have many other inspiring stories waiting to be shared with you. Leave in the comments your city and what touched you most in this story. Was it Amanda's determination, Claire's redemption, Isabel's enduring legacy? Your opinion is very important to us. Click the bell, turn on notifications, and don't miss any of our exciting stories. Until next time!